If everybody loves big government, love the Fed, because they can finance the wars and all the welfare you want.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its maximum hour of danger. You are that generation. This is your role. Freedom must be defended from the government that wants to take it away from us.
And good morning, friends. Thanks for joining us. It's a beautiful day here where I am, sort of, but it's always a beautiful day to talk about truth and freedom. I have on the line our friend Rory, a contributor over at SGTreport.com, the corporate propaganda antidote. Rory, welcome back. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Thank you, Sean. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, too. I went out to dinner last night with my wife and a couple of neighbor friends, and we talked about the criminality coming out of Washington. We talked about all of the problems and crimes being perpetrated on the people by the administration, the Obama administration, and Eric Holder at the Department of Justice, and my almost libertarian-minded friend, but mostly stuck in the Republican camp, who is a sort of a head honcho over at 3M. He finds himself stuck squarely in a camp that I am no longer in, and he, believe it or not, Rory, thinks that all of these crimes, including the IRS phone tapping and following AP reporters and Fox News reporters and Benghazi, he thinks this is all accidental. He thinks the IRS phone tapping scandal is probably, some mid-level person trying to make a name for himself. So many people I know don't see the big picture, and it's so frustrating. Our problems, as you know, Rory, are far larger than Fast and Furious or Benghazi or the AP phone tapping scandal by the Justice Department or the IRS targeting patriot groups and constitutionalists. The heart of this bankster New World Order plans has always been a fascist coup of the Pentagon and the U.S. government. It's a fact. They tried to do exactly that with the help of New World Order minion Prescott Bush, father to former President George Herbert Walker Bush, who also once headed the CIA, and they tried to do it in the 1930s. Fortunately for humanity, General Smedley Butler, who was a true patriot and a man of honor, was the man they tapped to help him pull off this fascist coup, and Butler played along just long enough to get the evidence of the bankster crimes, and then he blew the whistle. There were congressional hearings, so this is all on the record. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research. But of course, as is the case now, back then no one went to jail, and General Smedley Butler wrote a book and spent the rest of his life trying to explain to Americans how war is a racket. Now, when we come back, we are going to delve into this, and I am going to quantifiably prove to the audience and any of the sheeple you want to share this with that our government has suffered a coup, and we are now a fascist government. We are controlled by the banksters, the Pentagon, and there is no more rule of law, and I don't expect there to be anytime soon. So going into break, we are going to remind you of what happened the day after 9/11. Listen to this clip.
The adversary is closer to home. It's the Pentagon bureaucracy.
Rumsfeld promised change, but the next day, the world changed. And in the rush to fund the war on terrorism, the war on waste seems to have been forgotten.
My 03 budget calls for more than $48 billion in new defense spending.
More money for the Pentagon when its own auditors admit the military cannot account for 25% of what it already spends.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
2.3 trillion with a T. That's $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in America.
$2.3 trillion, my friends, and don't think for a minute they can't track it. They can track it. They just won't tell you what they did with it. And welcome back to Unbound Radio, friends. I'm your host, Sean, from the SGT Report, the corporate propaganda antidote. And on the line is my good friend Rory, who's a contributor daily over at SGTreport.com. Rory, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
Now, before we went to break, we played a clip from Donald Rumsfeld and his testimony that the Pentagon cannot account for, or, parentheses, will not tell you, what happened to $2.3 trillion, and this was said the day before 9/11. The false flag attacks on 9/11 changed everything, okay? And the man who said those words about $2.3 trillion missing, Donald Rumsfeld, was in charge at the Pentagon on the day 9/11. His buddy Dick Cheney was in control in the bunker below the White House on 9/11. And the two of them together, who had under the Ronald Reagan administration created the COG, the Continuity of Government Plan, the two of them implemented the Continuity of Government Plan on 9/11, and that plan has essentially remained in effect ever since under the Emergency Act, the National Emergency Act, which has been renewed every single year since 9/11, most recently under Obama. So when we hear people like the ones you're going to hear next in this clip, people like Senator Lindsey Graham and people like Robert Taylor, the acting general counsel, a lawyer over at the Department of Defense, and when you hear Michael Sheehan, the Assistant Secretary of Defense in charge of Special Ops at the Pentagon, when you hear these men talk like you're going to in this clip, what you are hearing are the men in the secret government. Okay? Here's the clip. This is from a hearing a week ago Thursday in which the war against Al-Qaeda and its affiliates was said will go on for 20 more years or more, and the claim was made during a Senate hearing revisiting authorizing the use of military force, which of course was enacted by Congress in the days after the false flag attacks of 9/11. All right? Listen to this clip with the fascist coup in mind.
Do you agree with me the war against radical Islam or terror, whatever description you like to provide, will go on after the second term of President Obama?
Now that's Senator Lindsey Graham, who's a traitor and a Pentagon absolute bootlicker.
Senator, in my judgment, this is going to go on for quite a while, and yes, beyond the second term of the president.
And beyond this term of Congress?
Yes, sir. I think it's at least 10 to 20 years.
So, from your point of view, you have all the authorization and legal authorities necessary to conduct a drone strike against terrorist organizations in Yemen without changing the EMF?
Yes, sir. I do believe that.
You agree with that, General?
I do, sir.
General, do you agree with that?
I do, sir.
Okay. Do you agree with me that when it comes to international terrorism, we're talking about a worldwide struggle?
Absolutely, sir.
Would you agree with me the battlefield is wherever the enemy chooses to make it?
Yes, sir, from Boston to the Fatah.
Now listen to that, from Boston to the Fatah. You have to understand that these men now have given themselves the power, they've taken the power, and they're not going to give it back to have the global war on terror battlefield be wherever they say it is, right? In our domestic shores, in Boston. Okay? They talk about, do you think that the president has the authorization to put boots on the ground in Yemen? How about the Congo? Yes, yes, yes. They're all affirmatively answering yes. There's nothing they can't do. And Lindsey Graham, if you look at his face in this clip, can barely contain his glee. Let's listen to the rest of it.
I couldn't agree with you more. Do you agree with that, General?
Yes, sir. I agree that the enemy decides where the battlefield is.
And it could be any place on the planet, and we have to be aware and able to act. And do you have the ability to act, and you aware of the threats?
Yes, sir. We do have the ability to react, and we are tracking the threats globally.
From my point of view, I think your analysis is correct, and I appreciate all of your service to our country.
So Lindsey Graham concludes his statement there, and we're going to follow the statement from Angus King, the senator from Maine. But Lindsey Graham says, I thank you so much for your service to our country. These men are not serving our country. These men are serving the secret government. They are serving the banksters. They are serving those who put them in power and will allow them to keep power. They are the men that took the power on 9/11 and will not give it back to the people. Eisenhower himself warned us that this would happen. Now, here's the great Aaron Russo, whose documentary film, Freedom to Fascism, is one everyone should see about IRS criminality, and that the IRS is just the collection arm of the Federal Reserve, the central bank of this country, and the banksters. And Aaron Russo was friends with Nick Rockefeller, okay? And Aaron Russo, through that friendship, found out lots and lots of information about what the banksters' plans were from Nick Rockefeller before that friendship fell apart, because Aaron Russo was so repulsed by what he had heard. And here's what Aaron Russo had to say about what went down on 9/11 and what's gone down every day since.
He's the one who told me 11 months before 9/11 ever happened that there was going to be an event. Never told me what the event was going to be, but there was going to be an event, and out of that event, we were going to invade Afghanistan to run pipelines from the Caspian Sea. We were going to invade Iraq, to take over the oil fields, establish a base in the Middle East, and make it all part of the New World Order. and we go after Chavez in Venezuela. And sure enough, later 9/11 happened, and I remember he was telling me how how you're gonna see soldiers looking in caves for people in Afghanistan and Pakistan and all these places, and there's going to be this war on terror, which is no real enemy, and the whole thing is a giant hoax, but it's a way for the government to take over the American people.
It's the way for the government to take over the American people. And who is the government? Well, the government is the CFR, founded by the Rockefellers. The government is the Federal Reserve, which was helped to be founded by the Rockefellers and the Morgans and the Rothschilds and the Warburgs. So who is the government, quote unquote? Well, the government is the banksters. It's been the banksters for a very long time. And on 9/11, they seized total control. And they rolled out the continuity of government plan, which allows the secret government to run unabated. It allows the secret government to have officially seized power and for everything else to be ceremonial, right? So, God bless him, Angus King, a senator from Maine, described the hearing that I played before for you when Lindsey Graham was licking the boots of the Pentagon officials. He described that hearing as astoundingly disturbing, and he accused the Obama administration of rewriting the Constitution. Well, that's only partially true. The rewriting of the Constitution occurred immediately after 9/11 with the continuity of government plan, which was rolled out by Rumsfeld, who admitted that the Pentagon stole $2.3 trillion, and they won't tell you what they did with it. This is the paradigm under which we now live, which my neighbor friend will never understand. Even if he listens to this broadcast, he'll think I'm nuts. But what I'm sharing with you is absolute hardcore fact. Now here's Angus King after listening to that disgraceful exchange between Lindsey Graham and the Pentagon officials.
Senator King.
Gentlemen, I've only been here 5 months, but this is the most astounding and most astoundingly disturbing hearing that I've been to since I've been here. You guys have essentially rewritten the Constitution here today. The Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, clearly says that the Congress has the power to declare war. This authorization to AUMF is very limited. And you keep using the term associated forces. You use it 13 times in your statement. That is not in the AUMF. And you said at one point, it suits us very well. I assume it does suit you very well because you're reading it to cover everything and anything. And then you said at another point, so even if the AUMF doesn't apply, the general law of war applies, and we can take these actions. So my question is, how do you possibly square this with the requirement of the Constitution that the Congress has the power to declare war? This is one of the most fundamental divisions in our constitutional scheme, that the Congress has the power to declare war. The President is the commander-in-chief and prosecutes the war. But you're reading this AUMF in such a way as to apply clearly outside of what it says.
Now, before we go to the response, this is maybe the most important part, because he's just asked them to defend how they can essentially seize power and go unchecked without Congress checking their powers, without Congress authorizing wars, without Congress being involved at all. And here's the response.
You had testified to Senator Graham that you believe that you could put boots on the ground in Yemen under this document. That makes the war powers a nullity. I'm sorry to ask such a long question, but my question is, what's your response to this?
Senator,
anybody.
Let me take the first response. I'm not a constitutional lawyer or a lawyer of any kind, but let me take a brief statement about Al-Qaeda and the organization that attacked us on September 11, 2001. In the 2 years prior to that, Senator King, that organization attacked us in East Africa and killed 17 Americans, our embassy in Nairobi.
All right. So, what did Aaron Russo say that Nick Rockefeller told him? Aaron Russo said that there was going to be an event in New York, and out of that event would come endless unconstitutional wars. The event happened. It was called 9/11. It was a false flag operation. Look into it. All right, I'm going to give you a list of ways to do that. Go to patriotsquestion911.com, and you're going to find 200 military intelligence service, law enforcement, and government officials who question the story. You're going to find 1,500 engineers and architects, over 250 pilots, 400 professors, 300 9/11 survivors and families, 200 artists, entertainers, and media professionals, and 400 medical professionals. And among these people are Major General Albert Stubblebine, General Wesley Clark, Colonel Ronald Ray, Captain Edgar Mitchell, Lieutenant Colonel Bob Bowman, Colonel George Nelson, former Assistant Secretary of the Treasury Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. All right, wise up. 9/11 was an inside job, and this man, who you just heard, did not answer the constitutional challenges and constitutional questions posed to him by Senator Angus King. No, he cited al-Qaeda because we were hit and hit hard on 9/11 by al-Qaeda. Meanwhile, government with the Pentagon and NATO and this New World Order globalist agenda is putting al-Qaeda, who we've given up all our rights to, and because of the 9/11 story, they put al-Qaeda in charge of Libya. They're using al-Qaeda to kill innocent people, Christians, men, women, and children, and to topple the Assad government in Syria. This criminal government runs, operates, and controls al-Qaeda. So when this criminal sits there and responds to Senator Angus King by saying, oh, sir, remember that we were hit hard on 9/11, do you see? It's all bogus, and he will not answer the constitutional question because what they are doing would not stand in a constitutional republic. They are beyond the bounds of the Constitution. They know it. Congress knows it. But what are we going to do about it when they own all the weapons? They have total supremacy. They're the Pentagon. They have taken the power, and they're not going to give it back. Maybe we should play this when we come back from break. Rory, in the next 30 seconds, what is your feeling? What is your response to what you've heard so far?
Well, to be quite honest, I'm more scared now than I was before, because to hear these generals and Lindsey Graham to hear what they're saying, and then to have Senator King to question them, and them to completely ignore this question and to defend it by saying, "Well, I'm not a constitutional lawyer." Well, of course not. You're a killer. I mean, you're a murderer, and you are a paid jackboot, and that's all you are. So, of course, you don't know anything. I mean, it's just...
Well, it's criminal. It's literally criminal. And the reason that he can't answer the constitutional question is because, like I said, this is beyond the bounds of the Constitution. We are now in Alice in Wonderland, folks. This is the Twilight Zone. Your republic has been toppled in a fascist coup. We are now controlled by bankers and the Pentagon. Stay with us. Now, before we went to break, we were just recapping for the audience how the fascist coup of the U.S. government, which was first the brainchild of the banksters on Wall Street and their cohorts, including Prescott Bush, the father of former President George Herbert Walker Bush, who also happened to be a director over at the CIA. You can see the web that these people have woven over the years for total control over our republic. And now, since 9/11, where George Bush Jr., George Herbert Walker Bush's son, was the sitting president, on 9/11 they accomplished their coup. Maybe it happened long before then, but I think it became official on 9/11, and they seized total power. Now, let's turn our attention here as we wrap this up before we move on to a precious metals recap and update. Jeremy Scahill has been moving heaven and earth to report the truth about this bogus war on terror, this global war on terror. He has a new book out called Dirty Wars, and he was on Democracy Now! Recently talking about this most treasonous exchange between Senator Lindsey Graham and the officials at the Pentagon. Here's Jeremy Scahill.
The concept of the world as a battlefield actually is not something I thought up. It's a doctrine, actually a military doctrine called operational preparation of the battle space, which views the world as a battlefield. And what it says is that if there are countries where the military predicts that conflicts are likely or that war is a possibility, you can forward deploy troops to those countries to prepare the battlefield. And under both Bush and Obama, the world has been declared the battlefield. You know, the authorization for the use of military force that was passed after 9/11 is technically the law that President Obama and his administration point to when they say they have a right to drone strike in Yemen, because these people are connected to the 9/11 attacks. But in reality, one of the enduring legacies of the Obama presidency is going to be that he solidified this Cheney-esque view of the U.S. government, which says that when it comes to foreign policy, that the executive branch is effectively a dictatorship, and that Congress only has a minimal role to play in oversight. I mean, Cheney didn't want Congress to have any role in it. Obama's administration plays this game with Congress. Certain people can go into the padded room and look at this one document, but not this other document. You're not allowed to bring in a utensil to write with, and you can't ever tell anyone what you said. That's congressional oversight on our assassination program. But they have doubled down on this all-powerful executive branch perspective.
They've doubled down because they've achieved what they wanted. They achieved their fascist coup. The government is no longer of, by, and for the people. The government is of, by, and for the corporations and the banksters. The government is of, by, and for those men that you saw sitting in that hearing talking to Senator Lindsey Graham, who couldn't contain his glee at the fact that this global war on terror will just go on for another 2 decades or more. And do you think after 20 years they're going to say, oh, now it's over? Now we got the bad guys, all is well? No, it's a 100-year war. It's a 1,000-year war. It's the end of freedom. It's the end of sovereignty. It's the end of the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and the Magna Carta. And now Jeremy Scahill rightly reminds us that when a chosen group of senators or congressmen are allowed access to any of this stuff, they're told you can't say what you saw and you can't talk about anything you heard here. Why is that? Because we don't have a representative government anymore. That's why. Because there's been a fascist coup. And I'm gonna tie this up all right now with another soundbite from Aaron Russo, whose great film, From Freedom to Fascism, explained the whole picture about how the IRS is the criminal control arm, the tax collection arm for the Federal Reserve Bank. And Aaron summed all of this up because his friend Nick Rockefeller said, and don't think this stops with the global war on terror. Don't think this stops with us wasting the national treasure with endless unconstitutional wars. No, we have much, much higher aims, much, much more sinister aims, much, much more sinister goals.
The whole agenda is to create a one-world government where everybody has an RFID chip implanted in them. All money is to be in those chips, right? There'll be no more cash. And this is giving me straight from Rockefeller himself. This is what they want to accomplish. And all money will be in your chips. And so instead of having cash, anytime you have money in your chip, they can take out whatever they want to take out whenever they want to. If they say you owe us this much money in taxes, they just deduct it out of your chip digitally. Total control. And if you're like me or you, and you're protesting what they're doing, they can just turn off your chip. And you have nothing. You can't buy food. You can't do anything. It's total control of the people.
It's total control of the people. That was the great Aaron Russo, who shared so much truth before he got cancer and unfortunately passed away far too soon, just several years ago. And he did us all a great service by sharing with us that true story of his quote-unquote friendship with Nick Rockefeller, a man who he thought was a good person until Rockefeller started to share all of these horrible, sinister things and plans with Aaron Russo. Rockefeller asked Aaron Russo to join the New World Order, join the Council on Foreign Relations, join with them. And when Aaron Russo said, why do you want to hurt people so bad? Why are you doing this? Why do you want to destroy the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and destroy, these are innocent people? And the response from Nick Rockefeller to Aaron Russo was, well, what do you care about these people? Just take care of yourself. Take care of your own family. Join us. We'll make you rich. So we don't need to get into spiritual warfare against the people in this segment. We don't have time because we need to get on to the precious metals update. Rory's been waiting patiently on the line with lots of great information about that. But this all ties together, don't you see? This all ties together. As the Constitution falls, as the Republic falls, as the banksters take over, as they implement their New World Order, as they try to demonetize this country and make us a cashless society in which all of your money and all of your future ability to buy or sell is on a chip that they control. If they don't like you, they don't even have to kill you. They can just turn off your chip. They can take everything you own, right? That's why we have long been talking to people about trying to protect themselves from a worst-case scenario, trying to protect themselves from these thieving, dishonest, evil bankers. And one way to do that is to own physical precious metals. Now, I want to talk a little bit, Rory, about this amazing article from Zero Hedge in which they say, and I quote, if I can find it here, forget prayer, it's lamb slaughter time, a rational man's response to all-time high gold shorts. Now, apparently, a new all-time high of 79,416 shorts is the COMEX gold short position. And, all bets are off because I'll tell you what, Rory, a contrarian view would be that when the herd is all going one direction, you want to go the other. And right now, the herd is absolutely betting on a gold collapse. But here's the thing. If there isn't a gold collapse and there's a short squeeze instead, these shorts are going to get slaughtered, which is what they deserve. What's your take on that? And I know you have so much more you want to share with us.
Well, just like you said, if they get slaughtered, which they will, that's what the criminal banksters do, is they set them up for slaughter. Then there you have it. They're gonna get exactly. I said a few weeks ago in one of our in one of these conversations that we were having, that if you're playing in the COMEX, you're an idiot. So, and if you are betting with 79,416 other contracts, then you deserve exactly what you're going to get because it is coming. Yeah. They've done it over and over and over and over and over and over. How many times do you have to lose all your money?
Well, let me ask you this, because I think this all ties in quite nicely to the first half of the program, which quantifiably demonstrates that there's been a fascist coup of our American government by the bankers, by those in the Pentagon, and that, someone very different than our representatives are now in control of this government. And the reason it ties in together is because my fear is that Aaron Russo's vision of the future, the one that Nick Rockefeller shared with him, could come true. Yeah. But we do see fractures and cracks in this globalist New World Order just about everywhere we look, whether it's in the derivatives area or the crumbling of the European Union, the health of the European Union. Why don't you help people understand how the dollar itself is under attack? And I'm going to just say this one thing before I turn it over to you, Rory. My fear is that, because I'd like to look at that as a good thing. I'd like to look at it as saying, well, guess what? The rest of the world is not going to let these banksters take over and control it all. When the dollar dies, so will the bankers. But I don't think that's true. The bankers are very, very diversified in world currencies. The bankers have control all over the planet. So when this thing crumbles, is it true that only we the people will be devastated, maybe not the bankers? What's your take?
Well, I think that the bankers are going to be well protected. I believe that they have plenty of gold. I believe they have plenty of silver. They have all they want. I mean, J.P. Morgan has the world's largest gold vault. So, and I'm sure it's not just sitting there collecting dust. So.
No, they're stealing it out. They're stealing it out the back door, Rory. You know that.
Well, yeah, I mean, but it's going somewhere. It's not just evaporating, and China and Russia, we know they're accumulating. We know also that everything that they dig up out of the ground, they keep. So all the gold that China digs up, they keep. Just found out a few days ago. Same thing with Russia. And Russia's production of gold is 21% of world production. They're not releasing that anymore. So there goes a lot more gold. And what are they? I have to believe, and I want to believe, that the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, along with Iran and Jim Willie believes Indonesia, are the counterbalance to these criminal Western dollar-controlled scumbags. And if you look at what's going on in Europe, there's a tiny piece that, and I believe it's Sweden, they've already gone to full digital money. I don't believe that they have any hard currency, and I hope that someone can verify that for me or in the audience. But I know that they're moving in that direction. And why is Canada talking about eliminating part of their coinage? Why is the United States talking about eliminating part of their coinage? These are small steps to get people prepared for not having anything in your wallet, not having anything except for a debit card or, as Aaron Russo said, a chip, implanted in your skin, I guess. I don't know.
That's right. So you're right. This is a move towards a cashless society. And, yes, as you said last week, we had a technical issue with the show, so we didn't broadcast, but you were telling me last week that what the BRICS nations are doing is that they're ring fencing the dollar. Okay, can you explain to people what that means?
What that means is that China is working diligently to head up the BRICS Development Fund. And according to Jim Willey, this is going to be a global trade bank. It's going to be similar to the BIS, the Bank of International Settlement, but instead of using any type of currency, they're going to use gold and silver. They already have an agreed upon price for gold between $7,000 and $8,000 an ounce, for silver $150 to $250 an ounce. And what they're going to do is they're going to seed this development fund with $50 billion, and it's going to all be treasury notes.
Well, let me interrupt. I have a question.
Sure.
Where did you get that information that there's an agreed upon price for $7,000 to $8,000 gold and $100 to $150 silver? I've not seen that. What can you cite a source for that?
The only source that I have is Jim Willey and his sources that have been part of the negotiations.
Okay.
So
that well may be true, because you also know that the Chinese yuan swap is something to be concerned about, because the Chinese have currency swaps in place with 20 other nations, and they're now actively bypassing the dollar. So my neighbor who works for 3M, who thinks all's well because the Dow is at, God knows what, 15,500, whatever it is, thinks that, these little ripples in the pond over, in Washington, D.C. are just accidental, and little lower level minions are causing trouble and making mistakes. These are all mistakes that can be easily explained away. People like that better wake up, right? The move away from the dollar is happening now. It's happening a year ago. It's happening 2 years ago.
Well, the yuan swap that China is extremely active in pursuing, having a direct swap, they have it with Australia. They have it with Turkey. They have it with Iran, Japan, Iraq, and Brazil. All of these are not small players. None of them. And Turkey has long been is similar in the gold world to India. And once again, according to Jim Willey, that's where they're going to set up the BRICS Development Fund, and they're going to trade gold for goods, and it's going to the gold is going to go into the development fund, and you will be issued a gold certificate in order to do trade. But the yuan swap, that's where the dollar is going to get ring fenced. Now, if you think about it, if China and Japan are doing direct trade and they're not using dollars, where are those dollars going to go? If China is doing direct trade with Australia, where are those dollars going to go? They're going to come back home. They're going to blow this economy sky high.
And then we may get the hyperinflation that's been talked about so long by John Williams and James Turk. And, those gentlemen have taken a lot of heat lately, James Turk in particular, for his predictions.
Yes.
And I understand that because people are sick and tired of this paper manipulation of the metals prices. But if what you're saying is accurate, if what Jim Willey is saying, if there's already a pre-agreed upon price for gold at $7,000 to $8,000, or with silver, $100 to $150 an ounce, we can see the future happening. We have a crystal ball. We can predict what's going to happen because, to your point, the trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars that are outside of this nation will pour back in. And when it pours back in, we are going to hit unimaginably horrible hyperinflation. And those that don't have physical precious metals in hand are going to be left literally with nothing. Now, I know that's hard to believe when the Dow's at 15,500 and, anybody with a stake in that feels fat and happy. But I can see it. I can see that vision of the future. I'm not sure if it will come to fruition in the next 24 months or ever, but I can see it. I can see the possibility and plausibility of it happening. Now, we have just over a minute left here, a minute 45. Your comments, Rory.
I wanted to read this, and it's from an article that Wolf Richter posted over at Testosterone Pit on May the 12th. The title is Russia's Plan for the BRICS to Dismantle the Dollar System. This is two of their points. First, of how they're going to do it, or what's important to them. Number one, reformation of the world currency system in order to create a representative stable and predictable system of world reserve currencies. That's their number one priority. Number two, reduction of the risk of destabilization of currency and equity markets linked to the massive cross-border flows of capital. If you just think about those 2 points right there, this is more important to them, to Russia, than what's going on in Syria. They're actually put Syria and what's going on there on the back burner because this is their priority to getting everything straight. The money is the problem, and the dollar, not the money, but the dollar is the problem, and that's what they are looking at under a microscope, period. And that's what they're trying to address.
All right, well said. 15 seconds here. We're headed into break. Thanks for joining us on UnboundRadio.com. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. And welcome back to UnboundRadio.com. I'm your host, Sean from SGT Report. And in this final segment of our 1 hour together today on Saturday, May 25th, I want to just circle back to what Rory was saying. Rory, before we went to break, you ended with the word period. And you're right, period. The dollar is the problem. The dollar is the threat to peace on this planet. The dollar as the world reserve currency allows the Pentagon and those men that were talking to that traitorous Senator Lindsey Graham, those men at the Pentagon, to wage endless wars. Because how do they fund those wars? They fund those wars with the fiat dollar. They fund those wars from a printing press. And I guess at the end of the day, if the world's reserve currency, the dollar, can collapse under its own criminal weight, under the weight of its own monumental debt, unrepayable debt, then maybe, just maybe, humanity can survive and these wars that the Pentagon wages can finally end. That's my prayer. That's my hope. You know, before we wrap this show up, Rory, do you have any comments at all, or do you want to take a minute to cover any other story in the precious metal space?
Well, I was digging around this morning, or just kind of looking around, and I went over to the Mint, which I do on a regular basis, the U.S. Mint, to see what's going on with the sale of American Eagles, both gold and silver. And I decided to go over and look at the product schedule. And when I went to the product schedule page, the very first entry is on sale date of 5/28/2013. The 2013 American Eagle 1 ounce silver uncirculated coin, and they have a price of $48.95. And I just found that rather curious because the spot price is currently $22.39.
Yeah.
$26.56 difference.
Yeah, and they do that sometimes.
I don't know who that price is for.
They do. Well, I can tell you it's not for the bullion dealers. The bullion dealers are not going to be paying, $26 over spot per coin for a tube of 20 or a monster box of 500. But I did find it more interesting, that 5-ouncer you cited, because how much is that one over spot?
That's the 2013 America the Beautiful 5-ounce silver uncirculated Great Basin National Park in Nevada, and that's $179.95. It's $35.99 per ounce, which is $13.60.
Got it.
Now, if you remember, back at the beginning of May, on May the 3rd, Bullion Street released the article regarding the Royal Canadian Mint's new proof coin, and it was coming out at $100 for a 28-gram Canadian maple.
That's right.
And that's when there were 19 comments on that article when we published that day, which is amazing to me. But what is the real price of silver?
Well,
that's the question that I have.
Yeah, that is the question, because the paper manipulated price is giving people the opportunity to buy silver here in the low 20s. I think anybody with the sense to do it, and that's a very, very small sliver of the population that even understands or is listening to this conversation, much less understands, wants to, or has taken the time to own and purchase physical precious metals. I mean, less than 1% of the population, folks. You've got a great opportunity here, because there will be a time in the near future where the physical price, the real world price to buy and attain physical silver is much, much higher, and I think that day is coming sooner than later. I want to wrap this up, Rory, by talking just briefly about spiritual wickedness in high places. We can see what's going on at the Pentagon. We can see what's going on with the Wall Street banks. We now know that a coup has taken place, and the men that are in charge of this government are hidden behind something called the secret government. So what do we do about it? We put on the full armor of God, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places, and we take action. Well, how do we do that? How do we take action? You get inspired. You get inspired to speak out. You get inspired to stand up. Do whatever it takes to make your voice heard, because if millions of us do that, these people have no power. And our good friend Judge Napolitano said it best, and we're going to leave you with his words now. This is your time.
Only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its maximum hour of danger. You are that generation. This is your role. Freedom must be defended from the government that wants to take it away from us.
Freedom must be defended, and if you don't do it, who will? If you don't stand up, who will? If not now, when? Rory, 20 seconds, last words from you.
Do everything that you can to protect your family. Love your spouse, love your children. Hold on tight. And if you can, after you get some food, after you get some water, after you get some ammo, after you get some protection, then protect your finances with gold or silver.
That's right. And love each other. Love each other, folks. We're all in this mess together. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. God bless.